Hello everyone. Today we are playing an Age of Alchemy battle report, but as some of you may have already read or know, this is actually the very first campaign game that we are going to be playing. This will be a rolling campaign where we are going to be playing a game which will be released on Sunday, and then during the week, by at the latest Wednesday, we'll be looking at releasing a short video which will be exclusive to patrons, which will be the post-game section of the campaign as we go through each game. This will be available to all patrons, so Scoundrel, Novice and Local Hero will get access to those exclusive videos, but only Novice and Local Hero will actually get access to the campaign rules, which will be up in a short while. So with that in mind, let us go through the usual. Let us introduce you to the two teams that we have with us today, and then we will go through the game we're going to play and also what small changes there are between playing a normal game and playing a campaign game. So for the Cleansers of the World, we have an Alchemist with a dagger, we have an Apprentice with a basic weapon, we have a Healer with a staff, we have a Marksperson with a crossbow and dagger, we have a Thief with bow and dagger, we have a Brawler, we have a Cultist with bludgeon, we have a Fanatic with two basic weapons, and then we have a further Cultist with a basic weapon. For the Long Drawn Death, on this side, we have an Alchemist with a dagger, a Apprentice with a staff, a Cultist with a basic weapon, two Markspersons with bow and dagger, another Cultist with a basic weapon, a Fanatic with a great weapon, and finally, two Cultists on the end, both armed with bludgeons. At the start of the campaign is the only time that you will roll for concoctions in that campaign in terms of rolling your original 6d6. So let's see what I get. And I'll pop up on screen just now what I've got. Now it's time for my opponent to roll their concoctions, and we will pop up on screen what they've chosen. So that has now deployed the objectives and also deployed our models. Quickly, I'm just going to point out that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 objectives. Now this game here is actually called Scavenge in the campaign rules. It behaves the same as Treasure Hunt, except that at the end of the game, each of these barrels that is in a player's possession will be worth 4 coins. Coins is something you will see as the system evolves to sort of explain how you spend money to improve your band of fighters. Over here we have the Healer, my Apprentice, the Cultist with bludgeon, Thief with bow and dagger, the Brawler, the Cultist with basic weapon, the Marksperson with crossbow and dagger, my Alchemist with her dagger, and then the Fanatic with the bearer basic weapons. As for my opponent, they have their Cultist, Apprentice, 2 more Cultists, Marksperson, Fanatic, Marksperson, Cultist, and Alchemist, all displayed across their side. Just a quick mention before we start. In a campaign, normally instead of lasting 6 turns with a potential 7, games in the campaign last 5 turns with a potential 6, and you will also see that there's an additional roll done before determination. This is the roll to determine, as in similar campaign games, if the group decides to flee. You'll see this come up as we're playing through the game, so watch out for that. And so we begin the game. We have turn 1 initiative, my opponent rolling first, rolling a 6. I roll a 6, so we'll try that again. They can go first. For a 1, I get a 6, so I'll be going first, and they'll get a reaction token. So we've come to the end of the turn 1 movement phase. I have moved up my Thief over here. My Healer is hiding around the back of this building. My Apprentice and Cultist have moved over here, with my Cultist actually getting one of the treasures. My Brawler has popped up over here. Cultist over here. My Marksperson has tried to get up here to get the treasure, but was just a bit short. And then my Alchemist and Fanatic have moved up on this side. As for my opponent, as I'd expect, their Cultist, or 3 Cultists and their Apprentice, have all surged up this way, with one of them getting the treasure. Their Marksperson stayed up here away from the edges so they might not fall. And then the Fanatic, Marksperson and Cultist have all moved up this way, And finally, the Alchemists themselves have dropped down off the hill, ran up this bridge to try and get at this. Right at the start of my shooting phase, my marksperson with crossbow was about to fire on my opponent's cultist with the barrel, but they have decided to react and have decided with that they were going to go and jump this way. They'll take the barrel with them because they picked that up in the movement phase. And unfortunately for me, that does actually grant them enough cover so that with the move penalty and the hard cover penalty from shooting through this building, I will actually not be able to hit my opponent's cultist. So in that case, my shot is wasted. For my next bit of shooting, my thief down here is going to fire all the way up at my opponent's marksperson. The reason I can actually get at them, even with the thief's low starting shooting skill, is because it's long range and move, but they're not getting cover. However, I do need to roll a 6. Which I don't, I roll the complete opposite and get a 1. To round out the shooting phase, I'm going to have my apprentice use my number 4, which is the firewall. I'm going to pick a point within 12, which we've established is going to be there. And then I'm going to roll to see if it goes off on a 2+. It does just. So we quickly replace that with this firewall. It's going to sit in there like so. For my opponent's part of the shooting phase, this marksperson is going to fire all over here to my cultist that is out in the open. The firewall doesn't actually grant any form of cover. We've worked it out. The only penalty they've got is movement because I'm just within 12 inches. So they're going to roll to see if they can hit on a 4. Next we move on to this marksperson here, firing across at my marksperson. They are over 12 inches away, so they'll have the penalty for that. And they have moved, so they'll be hitting on a 5 in this case, which they do. They're looking at a damage 3, resistance 3, so they're looking at 4, 5, and 6 for critical. They get a 4, so that's a wound on me, but the important thing I'll do, because I am within 1 inch of an edge, is test to see if I fall, which I don't, so I just take the wound. To round out my opponent's half of the shooting phase, they're going to have their Alchemist use the Snake Venom Dart, which is number 1. And they've decided to fire it all the way over at my crossbowman here, or my marksperson here. They are able to see them out in the open, but they have moved and it is over 12 inches, so there'll be a penalty for that as well, taking them from a 2 to a 4 to hit. And they've hit. It is damage 5 against my resistance 3, so they're going to get a +2 to this dice. And that becomes a 4. However, that would only be a single wound, but I still have to roll to see if I fall, which I don't do. With that, we actually come to the end of the turn because there is nobody in range for combat. As it stands, my opponent has 1 barrel over here, and I have 1 barrel of treasure over here. So join us as we are about to go into turn 2. Start of turn 2, there's no determination rolls to make, so my opponent's going to roll their dice and get a 4. I get a 6, so I'll be going first, and they'll get 2 reaction tokens. Just at the start of the movement phase, I was about to move my marksperson here, and my opponent has actually declared that they are going to use a snapshot against them before they move. Now they are still just over 12 inches away, so they're going to have a -1 to this. They'll be hitting on a 4. And they've just missed it by 1. So I will move my marksperson over and they will go and claim that barrel. With my opponent actually having a second reaction token, they've decided that my cultist over here, they're going to attack with their marksperson with a snapshot, but they're actually going to do it after I've finished moving, because this cultist plans to go over to here so it can be in range of that barrel, but is still not actually going to get cover from this marksperson shooting at them. So my opponent will hit them on a 3. Which they don't, unfortunately. So here we are at the end of the turn 2 movement. As we can see, my opponent has actually reacted with 2 of their models which have got the tokens assigned to them. And then everyone else is sort of relatively clumped up in the centre, with my opponent sending most of their models into the centre, me sending a couple of models out on the flanks, and also retreating with this poor cultist over here who actually has a treasure. So he's moved back around there. For my first bit of shooting, I'm going to have my marksperson up here removed across the roof, fired down at the fanatic because they are in line of sight, and they're getting no cover. It is, however, a -2 because of the crossbow's move penalty. So I'm going to see if I can hit on a 5, which I do. It is damage 4 against resistance 3, so we're getting a +1 to this. I roll a 5. It's just... No, I'm going to re-roll that. I get a 4, which goes up to a 5, so my opponent will lose a wound off their fanatic. So after checking, it appears that my thief over here can draw a line of sight all the way down to this model here, the cultist with the barrel. So he's going to try and hit him. It will be on a 6, however, with all the associated penalties. And nowhere near. For my last bit of shooting, it's going to be some alchemy, and it's going to be Path of Righteous Flame from this apprentice. Now, we've actually measured it. I can get this fanatic, and there's a cultist hiding under this bridge that when we draw the line for Path of Righteous Flame, it gets both of them. So I'm now going to roll to wound. So it will be damage 4. It just goes straight off. There's no need to roll. So damage 4 against this model. That's a 4. So they go down to 1 wound. And then this model here at the back, it's a 3, but that is enough because it's damage 4 against resistance 3. So they'll take a wound as well. For my opponent's first bit of shooting, they've decided that their Alchemist is going to use the Bloated Fly Globe, which has a 12-inch range for the point they need to pick, and they've chosen this point here. Now, it will go off on a 3+, which they're going to roll to see if it does. Unfortunately, it doesn't, so that is just removed. So my opponent's next bit of shooting is this marksperson, again at my marksperson, still more than 12 inches away. And they've reacted, so it's going to be a -2 to their 3, meaning they hit on a 5. Let's see what they roll. No, just 1 shy of what they needed. Next, my opponent's marksperson over here is going to fire at my brawler. They have a clear line of sight, and they have reacted, so they have a -1 penalty for that, so they'll be hitting on a 4. So roll, see what they get. A 3, just shy of what they needed. So we've come to the end of the shooting phase and into the combat phase. My very first combat is going to be here, which is like so I don't have to go through the fire, but it does mean we fight at the same time. Now I have 1 attack hitting on a 3, which doesn't. My opponent has 1 attack hitting on a 4, which does, and they are at damage 6 to my resistance 3, so we'll see what they get. And that is my apprentice removed from the game. That didn't go well. And with that, my opponent has decided they're actually going to hop over and end up on this side here. So after that rather disastrous display, my brawler is going to go and try and see if he can do what the apprentice didn't. So he's going to run around like so. He's going to have his 2 attacks hitting on 3s with his fists, both of which hit. He's looking at a damage 2 resistance 3, so it's a 5 or 6 he needs. No, he's failed. My opponent gets 1 attack hitting on a 4, which they don't. So they run away on a 4, which they do. So with that, my opponent has moved over here, and I have moved over here. Next, I'm actually, as silly as it seems, I'm going to send my healer who can run around and just get into contact with the enemy there. They are going to need to hit on a 5, though, which they don't do. So my opponent attacks back hitting on a 4. Which they don't do, but running away on a 4, which they do. And in this case, they're going to have to go back where they were, and then I get 2 inches. So I'm going to go back here like so. So with that, my opponent moving back over here, it actually means that my cultist can now make base contact with my opponent's fanatic over here. So they're going to run around like so, and more importantly, take the barrel with them. So they're going to roll 1 attack hitting on a 4, which they do, and then damage 3 resistance 3, which they do. They sink the fanatic, and with that I get to go 4 inches, and I'm going to use those to go 4 inches back like so. But the fanatic is finally removed. So with that, my opponent has realised that the only model they can actually charge with is this cultist, and they're going to charge my brawler, because they are within like so. They're going to come this way and take the barrel with them. They have 1 attack, which will hit on a 4 with their bludgeon, which does. They're looking at damage 4 to my resistance 3, so they're looking at a +1 to this dice. Okay, so it only goes up to 2, which unfortunately doesn't get a wound. I will attack back with my Brawler, hitting on 3s. Both hit. Looking at 5s and 6s, because damage 2 against resistance 3. I get 1 wound on my opponent, and they're now going to roll to disengage on a 3+, which they do. So they're going to shuffle back and pop a wound. And I am going to go 6 inches, so I'm going to use that. I'm actually going to go 6 inches this way and just go over here. So after that, we actually come to the end of turn 2. We've had a few combats here and there, which took a bit of a while, but we've both lost a model. I currently now have 3 of the treasures to my opponent's 2. So join us as we go into turn 3 to see what happens. Start of turn 3, rolling for initiative. My opponent is going to get me to roll first. I get a 5, and they get a 5. Let's try that again. I'll go... Oh no, they're going to go first with a 6. And I've got a 1, so they'll be going first, and I'll go second with a reaction token. So with that, we actually come to the end of turn 3 movement. I decided not to react at all. However, as you can see, my opponent has kept their marksperson up over here, but has moved most of their force into the centre. So they're just trying to block me down. I have skirted my models around on the flanks, sort of coming all the way around here, with my 3 barrel treasure holding models moving away. However, a sneaky little thief has moved himself up this way to try and get shots on my opponent's Alchemist. So for the start of my opponent's shooting, they declared that this marksperson was going to fire at my Brawler. My Brawler's going to react, and he's actually going to dive like so, meaning that my opponent now actually has to shoot through their cultist to hit me. Now their cultist, their marksperson has a 3 normally, they've moved, and it's hard cover from their own model, so they're actually not gonna, they're gonna end up hitting me on a 6 in this case, but if they roll a 5, they will end up hitting their own model. So let's see what they roll. They hit nobody, that's okay. So my opponent has decided to use their number 1 snake venom dart, but we have a bit of a weird instance here because they're going to fire at my thief. But in the rules, they would be hitting on a 2 normally, and they're within 4 inches, so it'd be a +1, so they would need a 1 or better. Now, as the rules stand, there is no automatic miss and automatic hit when it comes to shooting. So in this case, this will automatically hit the thief. So my opponent just needs to roll to wound damage 5 against resistance 3, so they're getting a +2 to this. And they've got a 4, which in this case would be a 6, like so. And then I have to roll, and my thief actually falls, and he would fall a solid 3 inches. I would have him personally fall on this side. So my opponent's going to roll to wound him. It's damage 3 against resistance 3 for the fall. And unfortunately, he's not taken out of action, but he does fall and land there. For the last little bit of shooting from my opponent, their marksperson is going to fire at my healer. They're over 12 inches, but they haven't moved, so the only penalty they've got is that 1 - 1. So they're going to be hitting on a 4, which they do, and then they're looking roll to wound. It's damage 3, resistance 3. Unfortunately, no, they don't get a wound. So for my shooting phase, due to my thief falling down and my marksperson needing to run away with the treasure, we are moving over to just doing alchemy. So I'm going to use a Molotov cocktail, which is a number 1. We've already picked the point, which is there, and it will go off on a 2+, which it does. I've now got to measure and check who's within 4 inches. So my Brawler is just out from the middle to middle, but it does mean we get this model, and this model. So I'm going to roll against them. They will take a wound on a 5 or 6. So this cultist, no. This cultist, no. And the apprentice, yes. So the apprentice takes a wound. So my opponent has actually decided that their cultist here is going to be able to try and hop this wall and charge into this marksperson. But in order to do that, it's going to be a blind charge. So they need to roll a 3 or more on their intelligence. And they don't, unfortunately, they get a 1. So my opponent's next charge, this cultist is going to charge like so into my Brawler. They have 1 attack, hitting on a 4. That's a hit. Rolling to wound on a damage 3, resistance 3. Unfortunately, I don't wound. I'm going to roll to hit back with my 2 attacks from the Brawler. 1 hits, no wounds, running away on a 3, which I do. So I am going to back away like so, and then my opponent is going to roll a 1. So they are just going to shift into the doorway, so I can't go back that way. Next bit of combat, my opponent's my opponent's cultist is going to charge my brawler like so. So they're going to have 1 attack hitting on a 4. But they can re-roll that because they're a cultist that made a charge. Unfortunately, it doesn't roll into a hit. I get to attack back. Both attacks hit. And I'll re-roll that one. Oh, and in that case, I actually caused 2 wounds. So my opponent needs to roll to back away, which they will do so on a 3+. They do. So in this case, they can either back away into the corner. Well, they can only really back away that way where they were without being out with an inch of someone. And then I'm going to roll 3. I'm actually just going to go to here. I'm actually going to do 2.
Okay, go on then.
So for my first bit of combat on my side, I'm actually going to have my healer, who's going to move like so, and then over. And then he can just do it because he only moved less than an inch on the other side. And he's going to charge this cultist here. 1 attack, hitting on a 3. No, hitting on a 5. Let's try that again. He fails to hit. My opponent gets to attack back, hitting on a 4. Which they don't do either. So on a 2+ or a 3+, no. 5 for me. Yep, we'll count that one. And then a damage 2 against resistance 3. No, I failed, so my opponent gets to run away, which they do, and they're going to have to back away like so. And then I go an inch, so I'm just going to go an inch back like that. Next combat for me, which I think actually is going to be my final combat of this turn, is Brawler into my opponent's cultist like so. I have 2 attacks hitting on 3s, 1 hits, and looking for a 5 or 6 to wound. Which it doesn't. My opponent gets to attack back, hitting on a 4, which they do. They're looking at damage 4 to resistance 3, so it's a +1 to this dice. Ooh, they do 7, which is still the critical wound like so. And then I'd back away. Yes, which I do on a 3. So I'm going to go back like so, and then my opponent gets to roll a dice, see if they want to back away. We'll see how far they can back away. 4 inches. So my opponent, after rolling that 4, ends up there on this side. And with that, we actually come to the end of the combat phase and the end of the turn. My opponent and I, as you can see, have quite a lot of differently wounded models across the board, but we've only lost 1 each. I'm still currently 3 treasures to my opponent's 2, but we'll see how that goes into turn 4. So as we come to the start of turn 4, we still don't have to make any determination rolls, but my opponent is going to roll and see what they get on their initiative. A 1. I get a 1 as well, so let's try that again. 6. 1, so my opponent will go first and I will get a reaction token. So we've actually come to the end of the movement phase. My opponent has stayed still with their marksperson, and alchemist, and then everyone else. My opponent has sort of surged forward this way into the middle, whereas I have moved round on this flank and moved these guys away to keep this barrel safe. And then I've moved over here to try and keep my brawler safe so I can heal them. And then also moved up with this cultist and moved up over here. So it's sort of my opponent coming into the middle and me coming round on the sides. For my opponent's first bit of shooting, this alchemist is going to use another snake venom dart, they did get 3 of them, to shoot down into this guy here. He is going to be getting soft cover, but that's the only thing he's getting. No movement penalty, no range penalty. So my opponent will hit him on a 3. Ooh, just 1 lower than they needed. Seems to be the theme for this game. Next, my opponent's marksperson is going to fire down at my cultist. It is just outside of 12, and I am getting soft cover. So there's going to be a -2, meaning they hit on a 5. Unfortunately, they miss. Next, my opponent's marksperson is going to fire into my cultist. The only penalty here is going to be soft cover, so it'll be hitting on a 4. They get a 6, so that hits. Rolling to wound, damage 3, resistance 3. And they get a wound as well. First bit of shooting for me, my healer is going to heal 1 wound from my brawler. Next, my marksperson, who has moved, so be on a 5 if he goes after this model, is going to roll to see if they can hit them. Ooh, no, nowhere near enough. And then finally, for my last bit, it's going to be a Path of Righteous Flame again from my Alchemist. And it's going to go like so, and unfortunately it's only going to hit this model here. So we're going to roll to wound. No, I get absolutely nothing. So my opponent has decided their cultist is going to charge my cultist. I've already moved the the wound counter and the treasure out the way. They get one attack. Oh no, they've decided to reposition them a bit. They get one attack hitting on a 4, which doesn't. I get one attack hitting on a 4, which does, rolling to wound, which it also does. So my opponent's going to be disengaging on a 3 or more. Let's see what they can get. They do, so they're going to disengage 2 inches back like so. And then I'm going to get a 5, and I'm actually going to go this way. With that, my opponent has decided that they are going to charge their Apprentice into my Brawler like so. They have one attack hitting on a 3 with the staff, which hits, rolling a 5 or 6 to wound, damage 2, resistance 3. Unfortunately not. I will attack back, hitting on 3s, 1 hit. However, in order to wound them, I need a 6 because it's damage 2 against resistance 4. No, so I have to back away, which I don't do, so my opponent gets a free attack, which hits, which doesn't wound, and I do back away, so I have to go back like so. And they're going to roll to see what they get. A 2. And they're just going to slide over. So my opponent has actually worked out that due to my backing away over here, they can charge like so. So they have one attack hitting on a 4, which does, rolling to wound, +1 to this. Ooh! They will remove me from play, but we're fighting over an obstacle, so I get my attacks back. Okay, fair enough, I fail massively. My opponent's then going to roll a dice and get a 4. After a bit of debate, my opponent has actually decided to move over to here. However, I have found out that my cultist, if I successfully make a blind charge, which I do, can go to here, hop over the wall, and just sort of sidle himself up like so. Now, that means he gets one attack hitting on a 4. Yep, we can count that, so that's a hit. Rolling to wound, it is damage 4 against resistance 3, so I get a +1. Ooh, and that's a 7, so that would actually take this model out, and the barrel would have been in base contact with him, so it'll be here. My movement is just going to be to go and stand on that barrel, so I'll be able to get it at the start of next turn. Next bit of charging, my cultist is going to go get a bit of revenge on my opponent's cultist. They're going to charge like so, and one attack hitting on a 4. No, my opponent gets to attack back hitting on a 4. No, they roll to run away on a 3 or more, which they don't, so I get a free attack, which I need to stop doing this, which does hit. Ooh, and it criticals as well, so that is my opponent removed from play, and I get to go 2 inches, which is going to be like so. And then, unfortunately, for my last charge, it's going to be this fanatic is going to charge into this cultist in here, like so. I have 2 attacks. They'll be hitting on 4s, but because I've made the charge, I'll be re-rolling these if I fail. So I get to re-roll this one. So that's 2 hits. And then I'm looking at damage 4 against resistance 3. So that is a 6. So in that case, that will be a critical, and then this one's a fail. So my opponent gets to attack back, 1 attack, hitting on a 4, which fails to hit, and they don't reroll because they didn't charge, so they're looking at backing away, which they also don't do. So I hit once, but I still get the rerolls. Okay, and I do wound them with that last one there, taking them out of play. I'm then going to roll to see where I go. 6 inches, I'm going to go back like this. And with that, we actually come to the end of turn 4. That is all the combat's done with. Join us as we go into turn 5. First thing we need to do, I have to roll determination, which I pass. Next it comes to my opponent, who has lost 4 models. They need to roll their determination. Let's see what they get. And they pass, so they're not losing any models. Now this is the point in the campaign where we actually introduce one of the other new rules, which is called pluck and running away. Now this means that if a person, after rolling their determination, can roll a dice and roll more than the number of models they have on the field at the start of the turn, then they can actually end up running away and automatically losing the game. My opponent just so happens to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if they were to roll a 6 now, they would fail their pluck test. So let's see what they get. No, they roll a 1, so in this case they are okay. After all that, we now roll to see initiative. My opponent gets a 3. I get a 5, so I'll be going first, and my opponent will get 2 reaction tokens. With that, we have the end of turn 5 movement phase. Also in the shooting phase, for my half at the start, there will actually be no shooting from me because my 2 shooting models can't see anyone, and my Alchemist isn't really going to bother with any of her alchemy because it's all area of effect and my opponent is quite spread out. So we will actually come back to you in my opponent's shooting phase. In the same manner as me, they're not actually going to use alchemy because it's a bit of a waste at the moment to use any, but they are going to have these 2 markspersons fire at this cultist. Now we've worked out that this one we're getting a soft cover penalty, this one we're getting a range penalty, so they'll be both hitting on 4s. In this case, my opponent's actually just going to do them both at the same time. So they're hitting on 4s, they both hit, they're looking to wound, it's damage 3 against resistance 3, let's see what they get. And in that case, they have utterly annihilated that model, he is gone. So I've decided to charge over here. Now my opponent was thinking of charging me to try and get to this barrel, but they've realised that if they react, it'll actually end up worse off. So I'm just going to pop myself in like so. And then I'm going to roll... Well, actually, no, I'm going to roll to see if I can hit them. I do. However, it is damage 2, resistance 4, so 6. Okay, I get a wound on my opponent. So they're already on 1 wound, so just going to pop a number 2 next to them for now. And then they're going to roll to attack back, hitting on a 3. Also wounding on a 6. No, they're going to run away on a 3+, which they do. However, the best they can back away is sort of just on the other side of this door. Then I'm going to roll, go 6, and I'm going to go like so. Now I can't get the barrel this turn. If it goes into a 6th turn, I can try and get it then. For the last charge of turn 5, my opponent is going to try a blind charge onto my thief. They need a 2+. Which they get, so they're going to run around like so, try and push them away. They have 1 attack, hitting on a 3, which hits, and then they're looking at a 5 or 6 to wounds. They're damage 2 against my resistance 3 with their dagger. Ooh, and it's just not enough. I attack back. I don't hit. Do I run away? I do run away, so I'm just going to go like so, and then my opponent's going to roll and get a 6. And they're going to use that to go back round there, like so. In the case of a campaign games are actually a turn shorter than the standalone games. So if my opponent rolls a 4, 5, 6, we get a turn 6. If they roll a 1, 2, 3, the game ends here. Let's see what they get. And the game ends here. So join us for the wrap-up, where we'll go over the table and we'll discuss about the post-game section during the week. So with that, we are actually at the end of the game. Now, as it stands in terms of the objective, I have 2 barrels over here and 1 all the way over here with my marksperson. But I don't have this one because I didn't have an opportunity to go and get it for a turn 6. But also because no one failed their pluck test, I don't also automatically snatch this one either. So I've only got 3. My opponent has got 1 over here with their Alchemist, which they have been keeping since the start of the game. So that is the end of the first campaign game we have played on this channel. You'll notice we haven't actually moved the models in front of me as we normally tend to do at the end of battle reports. That's because we have to go around the table now and count up wounds, models removed and things like that for the post-game. Now in terms of the post-game video, it will be up on our Patreon site. and we're looking to try and get it up by at the latest Wednesday evening, but it might be up before then. However, the only way you're going to get access to the post-game video to see what's happened after this game before we go on to the next one is by becoming a Patreon. If you are in any of the 3 tiers, so Scoundrel, Novice or Local Hero, you will get access to all of those videos for the post-game, looking at from £2 per month. If you have access to the Novice or Local Hero tiers, those will get you access to the campaign rules as well as the main rules and loads of other little extras. These we will be putting up. The campaign rules we'll be looking at putting up. I'm going to put a deadline of August the 15th, which should be nearly 2 weeks from today. So they'll be up by then. If not, they'll be up before then. So all it remains to say is thank you very much for joining us. Like I say, if you are a patron, look out for the post game. And for the rest of you, I will see you in the next battle report.